Welcome everyone. A hearty good morning to all. The Department of English, Government College Kottayam, greets and welcomes you to this online gathering. The second session of the webinar series on negotiating gender critical perspectives will begin shortly. Our resource person for the day is Rachana Mudraboyina, a self-identified independent transgender rights activist and the founding member of an unregistered and unfunded collective, namely Telangana Hijra Intersex Transgender Samadi. Our esteemed guest will enlighten us on inclusivity of gender diversity in language, trans perspective. Professor M.S. Somarajan is a true leader who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. With great pleasure and honor, I call upon the head of our department and the pillar of strength, our beloved Somarajan sir, to welcome the gathering.
Respected Rachana Mudraboyina, participants from various institutions, my dear colleagues and students. Today we have gathered here for the second session of the webinar series on gender studies being organized by the Department of English, Government College Kottayam. The first session was on the 23rd of January and it was on reading gender in literature. And it was by Devi Chitra and it was well attended and well received. The topic for today's session is inclusivity of gender diversity trans perspective, and it is being carried out by a well-known transgender activist, Rachana Mudraboyina. We are extremely fortunate that we got Rachana for the talk, and I hope that Rachana would be able to enlighten us on various aspects of language from a transgender perspective. On behalf of all the participants here, I extend to you, Rachana, a very hearty welcome. Participants from various institutions, faculty members, research scholars, and students have joined the program, and I hope that this session will be a fruitful one for all of them. On behalf of the Department of English, I extend a hearty welcome to all the participants. The coordinator of the webinar is Lekshmi P.S. and she has done her job in a meticulous manner. It was her sincerity and dedication that made this seminar a reality. The other members of the department also contributed significantly for this seminar to materialize. For the sake of formality, I welcome all my colleagues to this program. The technical team of the department also contributed significantly for the smooth conduct of the webinar. The students of the department also have joined the program and hope that this will be a beneficial one for all of them. I conclude by welcoming one and all once again to this gathering. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. And now let's move on to the chief event of the day, the one all of us have been waiting for, the talk by Rachana Mudraboyina. But before listening to her, let me call upon another adored member of our department, Ms. Biya, to introduce the resource person and chair the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Good morning. It's my privilege to introduce to you the resource person for today's session, Ms. Rachana Mudraboyina. Today, she will be talking on inclusivity of gender diversity in language, trans perspective. Ms. Rachana Mudraboyina is a self-identified independent transgender rights activist from Hyderabad, founding member of Telangana Hijra Intersex Transgender Samadi. She is also a founding member of Transvision YouTube channel, board member of Human Rights Law Network, National LGBT Response, National Resource Person for National Council of Churches and part of the Equality Forum, resource person for National Institute for Rural Development and Panchayat Raj, and resource person for National Institute for Social Defense. She is noted for her admirable work as a transgender rights activist, and she is committed to the upliftment of the members of her community and has represented her community in various national and international forums. And it's indeed an honor to have you with us, ma'am, today. And on behalf of the Department of English, the Government College Kottayam, I welcome you, ma'am, to deliver the talk on inclusivity of gender diversity in language, trans perspective. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, and good morning, all. And thank you, first of all, for the Government College of Kottayam and Professor Lakshmi for inviting me for this lecture. And I would be like talking for 45 minutes, and I'll be like to take more questions because the more we discuss, we can bridge a gap in within the communication skills, and also in English how the language has been not inclusive at all. So, starting, so English has been always inclusive, the language, because to make you all feel like that, can anyone tell that any word which is equal to trans in any of the Indian languages? Ours is a very diversified country, and we have a lot of languages which are official and unofficial, which are script and not also unscripted. But there is no equal such word to trans. Still, we use the word trans from English. So, of course, it's the effect of colonialism. I do agree that. And apart from that, we are also how our culture, how our language has ignored or excluded the people with gender variation or gender diversity. So, with that start, I would like to start my lecture saying that language and gender, there is a relationship, there is a historical, cultural, economical, political relationship between the language and gender all the time, because the gender has been always in binary, and that's how it has been reflected into the language, and that has which has been reflected into the writings, and also into actions. It can be in the media, it can be small screen, big screen, in any sort of media or role plays. And that's how it has been translated into at the end into actions also. It means a lot of things. How language has been excluded the people with other genders, and that's how it has been not drawn into the attention of people with other genders, people in other genders, and not brought into limelight their issues. So people whose issues has not been written, spoken, or discussed have never gone into the policies or laws of the land. And that's how people and the society has been excluded those people, kept away from the society and the social issues, and push them into the fringes of the society, and push them to the fringes from the formal education, employment system, and all other welfare systems of the society. So we need to see how a language has been excluded this, and how we create a momentum or a sustainable dialogue within the language also to include the gender diversity. So it gender has been always diverse. Gender has been always diverse, and the language should be very much inclusive of all the genders. Unless until the language is inclusive, the people who are into the different genders, their issues cannot be highlighted or bring into the limelight or the daylight. So after 2014, as you all know, the Supreme Court of India has delivered this historical judgment, Nalsa versus Union of India, where it has said that gender is a continuum. See the language of this judgment also. It's a 104 pages, beautiful judgment. And I need to share that Argentina is the first country to bring such inclusive judgment and policy for trans people, and then the Netherlands, and ours is the third country to bring such judgment, historical judgment on transgender people. The Supreme Court is saying in its language that gender is a continuum. How it is a continuum? It said that there are The gender is never stereotyped. Then how society has articulated it, how it has depicted it as a male or female. It's never in a binary. The Supreme Court has narrated it's to me as a transgender person. To me, it's not a definition of just a transgender person. The court has said, the apex court has defined. It's also a definition of gender. It has gone beyond the transgender definition and said that gender has never been in binary. It is a continuum between two, the male and female. So there is a spectrum in between these two genders. You can place yourself anywhere. For example, me, I am Rachana and I identify myself as a trans woman. So I'm a trans person who identify myself as towards a female gender. So I identify and I say myself as a trans woman. In the same way, there are people who are born as female and identify themselves as a male. So they tilt towards male gender. So they are called as trans men. So there are also various, cultural terms or terminologies or the communities which comes in between these two genders and have with different names. For example, in South India, in Tamil Nadu, they say that Arvani, Tirunangai, and Shiva Shakti, Jogappa in Karnataka, and also in northeast of India, Nupi Manbi. All these are the terms, cultural terms given to the trans people in various, mostly trans women in various parts of this country. And so this transgender definition of Supreme Court includes all these cultural terms, all the gender diversified terms like gender queer also, if they identify themselves as trans, they will become under the definition of trans. And if also intersex people, as you all know, there are intersex people who are born with two genders or neither of the genders. So you can say that sex is also diverse. It's not only male child or female child born, babies born. There are also intersex babies born, either with two reproductive organs or with none of the reproductive organs or with one organ developed or one organ undeveloped. So these are the three physical variations which you can see in intersex babies. So they can identify also themselves as trans for the time when they got politicization as trans when they grown up into adults. So for them to do these rectification surgeries, so it should be given choice to them which gender they will be living. So they can be done as a male. The surgery can be done as a male or a female or a trans, and they can be done any surgery. They can live in any surgery like female or male, but can be identified as a trans also, including male, female. So this transgender definition of apex court includes the Supreme Court has said. See the language, how inclusive the language is. Also the definition of transgender also. Someone cannot identify someone as a trans person. It's only the right of trans person and also the liberty of the trans person who can tell herself himself or themselves that they are trans person. No single other person, no, neither parents, neither friends, neither neighbors, relatives, or doctor including, cannot say that person is a trans person. So gender identity is a self-identity, and that's how trans people can also say that they are trans people. And the state has to accept it. So see the language and the definition of the language and the language of the definition. So Supreme Court said ultimately that a trans person can be identified in this country as a male, in a male gender, or in a female gender, or as a transgender. The third gender is a transgender. And under the third gender, they have given the various identities like hijra, kinder, trans women, trans men, intersex. And the definition is not ended, it's an open ended definition. Open in the sense like in the end of the definition, the Supreme Court said any such person who they self, themselves, herself, or himself finds that they are set into this definition can declare themselves as a trans or a third gender. So that's a beautiful language of this judgment saying that gender is not binary, it's always diverse, it's a spectrum, it is a continuum between two genders, and anyone who can self-identify themselves as trans or feel themselves fit into this definition can identify self-identify as a trans. And surgery is not compulsory. If anyone forced some trans person to get done surgery to identify as trans person, that is illegal. Supreme Court said that very clearly. So this language itself, the language of this judgment, had rolled out, had merged, had synced into the ideologies and the movement of trans. That's how a trans movement has came out very visible in our country, and which is going and running in different directions, diverse directions. And each day, every hour, all the transgender activists or transgender rights activists of this country continuously striving hard for the implementation of this judgment, every single word of this judgment in this country. Now, coming to the language. So, this is the language of the law which has made inclusive definition. Inclusive in the sense it is to be, gender used to be binary, always in the language, into the actions. But now, after the Supreme Court saying that the language should be, the definition should be also inclusive, gender definition, transgender people also should be included. That's how the definition becomes, gender definition becomes more inclusive. And that's how it come into the reflected into various actions, various policies, and various laws. And it has become as a movement, trans movements at present. After this judgment, you all know in 2018 we got a judgment decriminalizing the IPC 377 also section, and which also have taken this NASA versus Union of India judgment as a base, saying that that transgender people have the fundamental rights which are into our Constitution of India, and that's how it is replicated even in decriminalizing of homosexuality also. Now, coming to the gender again and the inclusivity of the language again in the inclusivity of gender and transgender people in the language, I would like to draw all your attention to one of the Malayalam movies, my ever favorite in 19, I think 68, I think. There is a movie called Tulamaram, in which the actress Sharada was also a Telugu actress. She has played the main lead role, and she got the national award for this movie. And that's how she identified. She got thrice the national award, and she identified as Urvashi Sharada. And that was the first film. Tulamaram is the first film where she got the national award for acting in this Malayalam. Why I'm drawing this reference of this movie is this movie is based on a progressive writer, the famous Marxist and women writer whose name is called Muppala Ranganayakam. And her novel and her writings as a feminist Marxist in the left circle has been so famous, and it ignited some sort of ideology and also thinking process in all the almost all progressive writings and also literature. But when after 2014, we have another autobiography of Revathamma. Revathamma is a Hijra transgender rights activist from Tamil Nadu, and she has written her own biography, Hijra story and story of Eunuch. It's not Eunuch. Eunuch is a derivative term. We won't use it. And Hijra, life of a Hijra. And this writing a critique on this novel by autobiography by Revathamma, Muppala Ranganayakama has written a critique in a magazine. So in that magazine, she has written and she has used the dead name of Revathamma. So what is dead name? So you should know all this language, and you should know when we are talking about language, we should all also know what is the importance of pronouns for transgender people also. So while asking, like many of us have confusion whether we have to use she, her, him, his, they, them, they. All these are pronouns. So many of us have the confusion which pronouns we should use for transgender people and which name actually. So we all are born in one gender, basically. Our sex is born in one sex, you can say, and that's how we identify our gender also. Our parents identify our gender also. And our parents give our name also in that gender. But during change and transitioning during from one gender to other gender, we leave our old gender, we leave our old name, and we get a new name. We ourselves get a new name, and we ourselves get a new life itself. What we feel, because all the time it has been a struggle with um, b- born in a one gender and to be live in another gender. So when we left all this old gender and old name and everything, the old name is always called as a dead name. And we never want our dead name. Dead name because it has dead. We don't want that name to be repeated in any sort of our life, in any time of our life. Because that all again reveals all the stigma and discrimination which we do and when we are in other gender. But now our gender has been changed a lot, so we need to change everything. So that name is dead name. Now Muppala Ranganayakama in this magazine, while writing the critique about Revatamma, he has used Revatamma's old name, which is very derogatory, which is very stringing, and which is stimulating her old, and old which we want to forget actually. And apart from that, she has also written various things, various observations of her about Revatamma autobiography. She has written one thing I'll quote as an example. She written somewhere in this critique saying that why should a trans woman need breast while trans women never give birth to any children and never feed children? Why should trans women need breast? So that's very uniting. Because, being a progressive uh, writer, we are not expecting that from her because we feel that all the educated people, all the leftists, all the Marxists, all progressive intellectuals will have some understanding of gender and what things not to do or not to do or not to do with people with gender diversity. Now, why do our trans women need a breast? It's not that breasts are only meant or for feeding children, and because transgender women are not able to give birth to children, they are not supposed to have breast. That's not the issue. The issue is like she is unable to understand the condition of a person whose journey is from one particular gender to another particular gender, and which is very painful. And so she, so we all transgender people during transition made lot of changes to our bodies, and that takes a lot of pain also, and lot of money and lot of time also. That's only to make ourselves feel comfortable to live in one gender. And this remaining of and degrading of our body is also attacking the privacy and dignity of the body, which we all doesn't want. Any of us, either men or women, doesn't want to leave or attack dignity or privacy of our body. And that's what happened in this. So what I mean to say is that often educated people also doesn't know how to deal with language, and which are things to be written, which are things to be spoken, and which are things to be not to be spoken or not to be written. I mean to say that and she might have not written all these things, and then we have written a reply to her critics in two other. So that weekly's fortnight and two other fortnights we have written uh, our response to her critique on Revatama autobiography. And we have said things is that like many times we educated people doesn't know that how to deal with gender also in the language. And coming to the pronouns thing, because I in between I escaped, like I forgot, like pronouns, how to use pronouns, what pronouns we need to use for transgender people. So always, if for example I'm a trans woman, so I feel myself as a woman. Though I'm born in a male gender, I have been transitioned to as a woman. I've done surgeries, I've done psychological counseling and everything. I'm dragged as a woman and everything. So always prefer if they are into the binary, trans people are into the binary, always prefer to pronounce as if they are into female gender, always prefer to always used to prefer as she and her. The pronoun should be, and if they are into trans men, if they are trans men, always prefer to pronounce he and her, his. Okay, and apart from that, it's always advisable to ask a trans person or a person with gender diversity which preferred pronouns they are comfortable in to talk with. So while asking a transgender person not only the name, we can also ask like it's not only transgender person. It's not confined that whoever people we are looking and whatever dress they are wearing. For example, if a trans person is wearing pant shirt, people say that, oh, he's a boy. No, you are not the person who need to judge the person is a boy or a girl. It's the same person will tell whether he is or she is a trans or not. So always prefer to ask the name and and immediately after the name, always ask the preferred pronouns which they wanted to identify themselves. And if at all you're not comfortable or they are not comfortable, you can call them in their own names. And that's how it comes like identify and the importance of gender within the language and how the pronouns should be. And UGC has issued a circular following the NALSA versus Union of India judgment to all the universities and colleges to treat transgender people as inclusive and to make policies within the educational institutions also. And if there are columns, male, female, you also add the third gender column also to get starting from the application itself. So all these have been made. But we need to also see how educational institutions or the state actors mostly, while making all these policies or systems available for the transgender people, how inclusive they are. Many of the institutions after the UGC regulars have given a third gender column, but that their ends know the matter, and just including the third column will not open all the gates to the transgender people, the all educations, and the transgender will come and get education. It's not that way because the stigma and discrimination of transgender people has not come in one day. Historically, structurally, from ages and ages, this discrimination has accumulated, and that's how they have been pushed into the out of the society and fringes of the society and kept away from the education and employment system. So just creating a third gender column doesn't create all the easy way for transgender people. We need to think that how effectively this get implemented into actions actually. So just creating a third gender column will not do. So all the transgender rights activists after NALSA versus Union of India of 2014 judgment, they need to repeatedly go to the courts, either High Court or Supreme Court, to revisit those courts to further implementation of this judgment. And that's how few historical judgments also came into force. For example, Grace Banu versus State of Tamil Nadu. In this judgment, Grace Banu is asked for reservation for transgender people in engineering college, and she became first engineering student. And after her daughter Tarika Banu, she also went to the Tamil Nadu High Court and got admission into the medical college. And Preetika Hashani, the first essay in Tamil Nadu, she also fought a case in High Court of Tamil Nadu and got appointed as an essay. And in the Kerala also, Kerala versus State of Kerala, even giving a male identity for trans men on ID cards. That's how the first Kerala Kerala group has went to the High Court, and the High Court has given good instructions to the government how to replicate the male, female, or transgender people on their identity card. So when the apex court of this land stood on behalf of transgender people and their constitutional rights and start becoming more vocal about their rights, that's how it given a strength for the whole transgender people of this country. And that's how the media and the people and everyone started writing first about, after this judgment, about transgender people. And the writings make the inclusivity. That's how the inclusivity come into the language also, and the language diversity also, because language is also diverse in our country. So, coming to the state actors, even the Supreme Court in its judgment said that the transgender community should be treated as a backward class community. But while implementing this spirit of the Nalsa judgment, the state actors have not been so active or not able to understand the meaning or the spirit of this judgment. And that's how every time the transgender activists need to visit courts for the implementation of Nalsa versus Union of India judgment. And that's how we got beautiful judgments also. And that orders have, which are in language, have translated into actions, beautiful actions. And that's how now we see our transgender people into educational institutions and also into the employment systems. So, so many times we feel that as a educated people, and as a liberated people, we feel that our language is very much inclusive. It's not that way. That's why I quoted the Mopala Ranganayakama example. And even being state actors also, we ignore, because the transphobia or the discrimination about transgender people from our childhood. So we are all social beings. As social beings, our language has been so excluded about people in different genders. That's how we discriminate the people also. That's where comes the real impact of language, usage of the language, where we exclude few people. We doesn't want to talk about those people, doesn't want to discuss about these people, we doesn't want to see about these people. That's how this exclusion has come out, and that's how the transgender people has been excluded, and their issues has been excluded, and all the ages whose peoples have been discouraged or not given any ear or eye, those people have, and society has been very much violent towards those people. And that's how the rights of transgender people, we won't read any stories of transgender people. Now, when the issue of stories comes, you all may feel now that there are few religious scriptures which talk and they are in writings about transgender people. For example, in those scriptures, we have a stories about Sikandi, Bruhannala, all these and Ardhanarishwara, all these characters have the roles where two genders have been depicted, or transgender character has been depicted. Of course, there are writings, and also in Bible there is a term called eunuchs, and even in Quran there is a word called mokhanna. And so the religious scriptures, you can say that they are more inclusive. Okay, but I feel like they are very much political. So religion is also political, and that's how gender has been articulated politically also within the reference or within the connotations or conventions of religion, and also in other fields also. And that's how gender has been always binary within the religion also, in the context of religion also. So these transgender roles or characters within the religious scriptures are also have been political and situational, circumstantial. That's what we mean. That's what we say in English. And for example, Sikandi is a character which has been used for such and such circumstance, and the role has been meant for some, or with some objective in that scripture. So there is the matter, but we won't see. And some people say that there is also in Ramayana. Our people have been went along with Rama, and they have waited there because Rama said all the men and women leave from here and now crossing the Sarayu river, and I'll come after 14 years. You all live and come after 14 years. But he doesn't address the transgender people. That's how they waited there for 14 years for him. So all these scriptures talk only single circumstance or situation about transgender people. Even Jonas also in Bible and Muhannas in Hadith, Muslim Quran. So, but what about the next thing happened to transgender people are people with gender diversity within after this religious context also. So it has not been taken up. It has not been continued within the language also. And these stories remain the stories also. Do the stories has brought any change from ages and ages with the transgender people's lives within the transgender people's life? No. And I can say with very much confidence that at least religion has provided some space for transgender people. Definitely, it has provided. It has safeguarded the transgender people because ultimately we find the religious, culturally identified communities within the South Asia Pacific region. Why I say that, Hijra take one example of the such communities where religion has been inclusive and given protection for transgender people. Hijra community has been culturally accepted in the society. Their blessings are treated as good. Their any birth or any marriage, people want to take their blessings, and that's how they feel like they are very pure because basically transgender people bodies are pure because they doesn't have any sex within them. And gender and sex has been often confused and conflated in this language context also. Right? So you can say now what is sex and what is gender? Is there any difference? Yes. Sex is in what we are born, and gender is a social identity which society gives us actually. And that's how language should has been always confused and confused between both of them. It has been always sex is equal to gender. That's what society feel at the end of the day. And with this single judgment in India and the progressive trans movement, we have making it more inclusive and also gender more diverse. It's never in binary. That's how. So now coming back to the scriptures and all the release in connotations, and that they ended. But see the difference of how when one judgment and the apex court has been said that the transgender people have been pushed into fringes of their constitutional rights. Now there comes the articulation of this judgment, saying that transgender people have been pushed and have been ignored all this time, and what about their welfare? Now people started thinking about their welfare and the inclusion and their inclusion of gender, how can be included. No more transgender people should be treated as a criminals or antisocial elements. That's how a judgment and the language of judgment has brought an inclusivity and given a strength to a voice of a particular community actually. And 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 being a Pexco stand with a marginalized community, it has boosted the confidence level of the transgender community at a lot on various lines. And why we need a different perceptions about gender, and it's only to understand the transgender people we need to discuss about gender or what, and that's an important is and how language is important to address this diversity or inclusivity. When we think of this so-called issue, like how the perception should be. So, being a citizen, as I said previously, also social being, and as I previously said, language helps a lot for civilizing human race. It is time now to revisit our perceptions, issues, values, and ethics, and how gender diversity is conceptualized. What I mean to say is that we all, when teaching to our kids, also, many of you might have been experienced that while any transgender person comes in front of us, we teach our kids saying that no, no, don't go and don't mix with them, don't talk to them. They'll take away you, they'll kidnap you, and they'll turn you also like them. That's a common myth and misconceptions society have, and we feed our children also with those perceptions, and that will not go for life now. The perception change of these ages and ages, the myths and misconceptions is that fed into the perceptions and through our language articulation. So that won't change. Even you go to school also, you carry with those perceptions. So now a lot of groundwork need to be done with our language and ethics and thinking process. And that's how we feed our ideology of perception building about transgender people at our home itself. Anyone can be a transgender person. A child born can be a transgender person. We don't know actually. And then how to address their issues. It has been a painful journey of transgender person of including my generation or my previous generation, because being a child, I have no language to narrate to my parents what I'm feeling, why my sex and my gender which I'm born in is different from sex and gender what I think or I visualize actually. This feeling, I have no words to narrate. If I have no words to narrate, and I have not written, and nobody has reading that, and even reading also is just as a story they are reading that, they have no impact, the reading has no impact building, then then how the social change will take place about transgender people, mostly about the perception of transgender people actually. So how this child will narrate the what is going on with him or her in her in with him or her, because the child cannot articulate the things with parents, and parents think I'm a boy and they expect me to behave as a boy, which I my thinking process or my visualization doesn't make me to allow me to do that. And the parents doesn't understand, teacher doesn't understand, teaching non-teaching staff doesn't understand, neighbors doesn't understand, and also relatives doesn't understand. Then where shall I express this? Which language I should express that? If I have to go to the toilet, I'm not convenient with girls or boys toilets, where should I go? Shall I stop like not going for toilet? And that affects my health also. With all this course, confusion and chaos, I will leave and I'm forced to leave my space in the family. So family is meant to be tend to be a very safest place for the children, and that's how for children with gender non-conforming. I repeat again, children with gender non-conforming or children with gender diversity, the family itself, the space family system itself, has been can be violent towards them. Because and only because our language and our perception building has not been diverse or inclusive. And that's how the child, or after a certain period being an adult, the trans person or the adult or the child is forced to leave that single and safest place, which we all feel the family, and forced to live on the roads, doing those cultural, livelihoods based on those cultural livelihoods, either begging or sex work. So we need to start that perception building from the ground, from the scratch, saying that we need to write more in our language about transgender people. We need to discuss and speak more and more about transgender people. We need to more articulate in the media. Can be big screen, can be small screen, can be in audio, video, visuals, tools, any of such. We need to discuss how inclusive gender is. I won't say that we always should be only transgenders issues we should take up, and we will. But if we try on a longer and sustainable basis to beat at how gender has been diverse, that will automatically take into its folds the transgender people. That's what I think. Because transgender diversity is not a single diversity. And gender itself is not a single or binary. It has been a spectrum. It has been diverse as colorful as a rainbow. And the rainbow we see 7 colors, but it has a lot of permutation combinations of colors. That's how naturally I define mostly when anyone say that how I define gender or transgender people. So the more the writings and the more the discussions we do, that's how we build a perception around transgender people, and transgender people's views or stories should be going into the narrations and the writings, and that's how the gender diversity can bring it to its ambit the transgender people's issues also. And many times we should not think that we know everything, like about transgender people and gender people with gender diversities, because often being educated also uh, from our brought up and from our culture, from our environment, we are often restricted to listen, write, or speak about, because the language itself has not been inclusive. Speak about transgender people. That's how our perception building has also been restricted all these ages. So we need to do everything from the beginning, that we need to start this dialogue and keep it on consistent basis, how we write, how we speak, and how we articulate about gender diversity, and within it folds it comes the transgender issues also. Now I finished the 45 minutes lecture. I would be like I'd like to take a few questions, if anything you have.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for enlightening us on the need for inclusivity of gender diversity in language. And now the platform is open for discussion. The participants may raise your questions. Ma'am, we have a question from Nayana Jama. And her question is, I have heard that the term trans is an umbrella term, which all types of people come under this category.
And transgender being a spectrum, it has lot of identities within itself. That's how the umbrella term came into existence. As I said previously also, transgender people can be included also. And anyhow, male, female, who are born into male, female gender, they can be identified as a transgender people. One thing. So they can be called as a trans women, trans men. And few times intersex people can also be identified as trans people. So intersex people, gender queer people, gender queer in the sense that their gender is very much fluid, in the sense they won't say that they are male or female, but the fluidity is there. So gender queer people are there. And apart from that, all the cultural identities, for example, international transvestites, transsexuals, and in our national context, Nupi Manvi in the Northeast, Ejjodu in the Telugu states, like Ejjodu is a tribal, transgender identity in the Andhra Pradesh tribal area. Tirunangai, Tirunambi, Aravani, all these cultural terms also, Kijra, Kinnar, all these also come into this context in this umbrella. So all these terms, cultural terms, or different names or different category of people who identify themselves under trans are called as trans umbrella.
Now we have another question from Nandita Shekhar, and she asked, what steps can we take to include transgenders in language?
We have less stories written, less novels written, less media tools, less. I think I have my own YouTube channel. I started called Transvision in 2017, where you can visit and see that I have discussed everything about transgender issues in my first series. Done it in 3 languages: Telugu, Kannada, and also Deccani Urdu. And we are now starting a second series. And we have a special COVID series also. What I mean to say is that you should have a media platforms to represent the transgender issues. And our writings and our speeches should be transgender issues. And who can do this better and best? Only transgender people can. Because they can narrate their own truth. So we need to bring in front and bring into the limelight transgender peoples, and you need to listen to them more and more, their voice also, to know about the reality. And that's how we break our myths and misconceptions about transgender people, and also very much helpful for the perceptual change, our own perceptual change. So one thing we need to write, we need to read, we need to articulate in the media forms, whether it can be small screen or big screen, and or a drama, a role play, or a magnetic theater, anything. And it should be and it should be going to the policies from the level of school to the health and to various sectors, health and culture and everything. That's one thing. And the last but not the least, these things, all the things should be done on a consistent basis. It's not that one day or 1 hour we do it, or one small story we have written, one novel has come. But it has to go consistently. Consistent in the sense, I'll give a good example. If we are writing a mainstream story, a story we are narrating, Are we thinking with the perspective of gender diversity? Are we thinking that in such story a transgender character will exist? We never think of that. You never go beyond male or female genders. So that's how we can make the language more inclusive.
We have another question from Anju Reggie. She says, I have read Eradicated, The Truth About Me, which memoirs a true life struggle and survival from Dorai Sami to Revati and the barriers that Hijras faced by. May I know if cultural space theory can provide a chance into a life in equality where culture and myths still exist?
Okay, thank you. So that's a good question. We often feel that you're true. Often the cultural spaces have been very repressive and very violent to the people within the patriarchal structure who are less in their gender in the patriarchal structure. I think you got that. Means in our society feel the male is the first gender, female is the second gender, and trans people becomes the third gender. That's how the hierarchy, the patriarchal system has bring this hierarchy in front of us, and that's how we feel that father is the head of the family. Of course, not in Kerala, God's own country. So, what I mean to say is that these powerful structures which culture has brought often has been repressive, and these hierarchies have been often repressive. Often and then, many people, many women, many transgender people have stood against these repressive structures and stood against these patriarchal structures and become more vocal, saying that how violent they are. Now, coming to the Hijra system. Definitely, any culture system have this patriarchal in a patriarchal form will have this repression. Even including Hijra system have a pinch of repression and exploitation in it. I never deny that. But what we have to see at the end of the day is that how families has been more repressive than Hijra systems because being family violent and violent spaces and repressive spaces for trans people, that's how they're forced to leave their natal family. That's how we are forced to leave our mother, father, sister, brother, and relatives, everyone, and go and join into and Israel space have been the only and single space which, when we leave our families, has provided a shelter, food, safety. There is no other single space. State has not created any space for us. If it were not created, then we might have seen trans people in colleges, schools, and also jobs. Why society has not created? Why we have to create our own system of a culture called Isra system? And why we have to live in one place? And you also adopt that place saying that it has been more repressive. Of course, Revati's uh, life story has brought all those negative things and also the repressive systems within Hijra also in front of us. That's true. She also agrees, and we all agree with that. There are repressive things within the cultural hierarchies and patriarchal systems. But what we need to see also the positive side, how we have taken the shelter of culture and religion, and that's how we have been living all these years, and we have not left with any profession. That's why we are forced for begging or sell our bodies in sex work. So, how far we will continue this culture? How far equality can be brought within this culture is a sustainable dialogue within which we are also Hijra system also taking over. That's happening within Hijra system also. Because more and more the liberty and equality we ring the bells of equality and liberty. The more the sound is echoes into our air also. That's how we all can claim with equality all that liberty also in the society also. What I mean to say is that the more we work on this in exploitation or inequalities within the Hijra system also, that's how trans people able to become more independent in the sense of education, in the sense of employment. They can go for diverse for life and they can think of alternate livelihoods, and that's how they come out of the repressive system. It happened with the women, and it has happened with trans people, and women has fought to the end and to the core and proved that we can do it. and occupied the every single spaces which men have never allowed them to do. And now it's turn of trans people. We also do it and prove it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And we have another question from Nayana Achama. Uh, she asked, do you think expression of gender and sexuality is much more subtle in India than other countries? Also, recently I watched a Netflix series called College Kottayam, in which one of the episodes is about the life of a transgender in rural India. Is it true that trans society still suffers discrimination even in metropolitan cities?
We feel that often, as I said, that we have seen great intellectuals, Marxists, leftists, have been well versed with the gender diversity and inclusivity. That's how I quoted Ranganayaka, my example also. It has never been like that. I have traveled across the country, India, and I feel like the rural parts have been more at the receiving transgender people, more at a positive note and the positive side actually. And that will be more surprising. Yes, as you said that metro spaces and more educated people are often to be repressive or stigmatizing towards transgender people or people with gender diversity. But rural spaces have been taken into fold those gender diversities or diversity within sexual orientations also, what I feel. So, as I quoted, Ekjodu is one such tribal trans identity in Andhra Pradesh and even Nopimanvi in the northeast also, where culturally and the tribal area people, the village people have accepted those trans people, kept with their families. They are never forced to quit their families, and they carry out with them till their end. They supported them. They have been they stood on behalf of their moms. In metro spaces, often we feel that more civilized and more we being an educated, we feel that we know more about gender and diversity and inclusivity because more educated. That was never like that. Because I quote the example of Nalsa versus Union of India judgment. It has taken 7 years. It has taken 7 years to get implementation. Not a single word of this judgment has get implemented. So what stopped anyone actually? What is stopping anyone? Like we have a lot of empathy, but a lot of sympathy towards transgender people. But why we are so much hesitant to implement the policies about inclusive policies about transgender people? And that's how we have systematically failed as a society, as a civilized, as a metros and everything. And now coming to metros, we all build the smart cities. We all like the path around. We like all the flyovers around and metros around. But how have you ever considered those spaces have been the living spaces for transgender people? So the more the discussion about the development or infrastructure changes within the metro lives, that will lead to the peoples who are actually forced to live on roads actually. So what I mean to say is that transgender people have not been provided any policy, inclusive policy or employment seat in the employment system. Because the employment system is also a hierarchy existed. A lot of network is there. It is based on sex, religion, caste, and freedom. Everything plays roles over there. And where will transgender people and how will transgender people get inducted into this system actually without any reservation? That's how we also ask for reservation. But in metro spaces, I'll quote a single example of how people have approached as Kerala has given 13 transgender people metro jobs and Noida has become the second, the Tamil Nadu now. But we approached the metro here and what they said, they have seen the other card. That's for a simple job for 7,000 rupees per month. Housekeeping job we approached. Then they didn't deny it. They denied saying that seeing at the Aadhaar card itself. So I never see that inclusivity within metro spaces because we often confused and this confusion existing still there and the perception have not been healthy towards transgender people. That's how the policies and even organizations have been inhibitive in considering the inclusivity about the transgender people. But whereas rural spaces has been more organic and more, it all depends upon organic, discussions and perceptions are built on their discussions and perceptions build on the truth of the life which they look upon, and that's how organically positive perceptions are built about transgender people, and that's the vast difference we find within metro life and the tribal or the village life about transgender.
The next question is from Veena Shashidharan. She says, over the past 2 decades, transgender studies has become fertile ground for new approaches to cultural analysis. Please comment on cultural protection of trans communities, problems of transgender concepts, rituals, and practices across linguistic communities.
We cannot, in the name of evolution or technical development, or in the name of development or evolution, we cannot eradicate or wipe out all the cultural productions which we built up organically all from ages and ages. That's how I feel. I also quoted in my previous questions also, I said that while in 2016 the government want to bring the first bill on transgender people, and that's how now in 2019 also it has become an act actually. So we all should know about the struggles behind this so-called 2019 Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act. In 2016 itself, in the form of bill, the bill says it criminalizes the begging. It criminalizes not only begging but also the enticement of begging. What does it mean? Means any person who go for begging or ask her a co-person, if Hijra is there, she has her chelas, ask her chelas to go for alms, beg the alms and come. We all will have the, because Hijras live in common space, they share resources, they share everything in common space. That is also crime, and 2 years imprisonment the bill has been suggesting. Then we all raise the question saying that you have not provided an inch of reservation in the education or employment system. Now you are criminalizing whatever the cultural, livelihood we have. Then where will we go? If you criminalize everything and we don't go for begging and we don't do anything, how will we live? That's like eradicating trans people, and that's how you want to criminalize every single trans people in this country. And after a great revolution and after great force and after giving continuous memorandums and also sending representations to the parliamentarians and also the ministry, and after a lot of consultation, this has been turned off. And they said now that that has been taken off. And like that, there are 27 changes from 2016. And until 2019, the bill became an act. It come down to 7 changes which need to be acknowledged and need to be done to the act itself also. What we mean to say is that we need, unless until this cultural shift, the cultural shift of safety, how this transition comes. We all want transgender people not to beg. And we as a people also, we might have not dreamed that we will beg and one day we'll become beggars, or we will be selling our bodies and become sex workers. Nobody, no single child, no single person dreams so actually. And this is the only option society which we gives for us. And that culture has been there. And that culture is to protect us, to make us to live and to struggle in this society for our rights, for equality and liberty. That's how we need to protect those spaces also, rather than criminalizing those spaces. And who wanted to exist in those spaces very amicably, they can stay there. And who wanted to come out and who want to be very independent, who want to be very liberal, can get education if you have inclusive policies, can get jobs if you have inclusive reservation system within jobs. And that's how, and that's the dialogue which we have to bring within the discourse of every language and every policy and every articulation, so that it translates into actions.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. We have a question from a YouTube audience, and Aradi Babu asks, can phobia be eradicated?
So there are a lot of phobias in on the earth, like, and which should be eradicated. Homophobia, transphobia, are consistently have been there, have been culturally have been there. So yes, they can be eradicated. Can be eradicated only when we promote the inclusivity and diversity in each and every spectrum, in language, in culture, in religion, in jobs, in education, and art and media and everything, every space. It make it more inclusive and we feel gender is diverse, that's how the transphobia can be eradicated. Yes, it can, definitely.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. We have another question from Dr. Lekshmi R. Nair. She asks, Madam, many of the transgender narratives voice the trauma that they have undergone as children and adolescents, growing up in an intensely hierarchical and patriarchal family space. I wish to know about the initiatives taken in this direction to reduce emotional trauma and offer support to adolescent children so that they can achieve a smooth transition to the gender of their preference.
That's a very technical and very relevant question. I feel I'm very happy for this question because often the psychological needs, forget about the counseling and also what are the other things to be done with LGBTQI people. Psychological needs, I said, are often ignored for of LGBTQI people. Now you all may think that do they need, and many of the larger portion of the society feel that it's a psychological disorder, and all these people need to be rectified or corrected, and that can be done through. And so there are a lot of regressive psychological process, like people have given foreign shocks to get their gender correctness or the sexuality correctness, and have been given steroids to get to get them to fit to the binary, which is very violent actually, and this has been happened actually, and being also happening now also in some corner of the globe, we can't say. What I mean to say is that the American Psychological Association has already said that this is not as a psychological disorder. It's only a diversity. And it also refers, and it has even a separate chapter for this, the International Classification of Diseases. It has removed from the chapter 5 and put a separate chapter 11. So this suggests it needs counseling. And the part when counseling comes, society feels it, look at, now they need counseling because they have psychological disorder. It's not that they have psychological disorder. It's because it is the psychological counseling or the counseling for LGBTQ people is to cope up with the pressure from the society. It's not to change themselves from inner. There's nothing to change within themselves or their perception of the behavior. They are as normal as you are, as normal as men and women are in the society. But they need counseling to cope up with the pressure. As you correctly said, as a child, I have a lot of confusion within myself. But I have also pressure of my parents, pressure of my school and my friends and everything. How will a child will cope up with such pressure? Such a child may go into the trauma also. And the child with psychological pressure may also face the physiological ailments also. So the child need counseling, the parents need counseling, the teacher need counseling, the school need counseling, not to change the child, but to cope up with the pressures of this situation, you know. And after from the child, if the adult, so-called child become an adult need counseling to cope up with the pressure, social pressure. You are born in one gender, but you are living in another gender. You are a wrong person. You are a doubtful person. You should not supposed to do this, and the society being violent to them. How to cope up this pressure? So we need counseling to deal with these pressures, and also need on the other end the stakeholders who are criminalizing us or who are becoming more violent to us to counsel them that they are wrong. Okay, it can be any of the stakeholders. So counseling is and must for the LGBT people to cope up with the pressures of the society. And there are a lot of counseling, partner counseling if you are into the relationship. There are family counseling, there are suicidal counseling. Often there are 73% of suicidal tendency within LGBTQ people, they said like. So you need suicidal counseling, you need career counseling. You being a LGBTQ person, how will you cope up with the pressures within a working space? You need that also. A lot of counselings, only not to change the LGBTQ people, but to cope up with the pressures of the society.
The next question is from Nitya Satyan. She asks, do you think bringing the LGBTQIA under the term queer will lead to homogenization of experiences, or will it be more assertive? She asks, do you think bringing the LGBTQIA under the term queer will lead to homogenization of experiences, or will it be more assertive?
Huh. So we need historically to know the love how we arrive at the word queer also, you know. So the queer is, you Google what is the meaning of queer and you go to any dictionary of queer, it say that it's a free expression actually, and a person who doesn't abide the social norms, actually restrictions, are called queer. Means they left everything. They're like they're not with the society. They are left any all the rules and they've broken all the rules of the society. That's how the term queer has been come into existence. That's how you said very relevantly that it has been more assertive. The word itself has been more assertive, and historically it has been assertive. And the word queer has helped us as LGBTQ people, helped us to become more assertive and become more vocal and to regain our spaces actually within the society. So society put it as a doubt on us, put it as an antisocial uh, element, as an antisocial thing on us. But we have broken those norms and we said that yes, we are queer, and that's how we need the equality and liberty, and we will occupy every single space. So the queer movement, the queer term has been itself has been more assertive and helped us all these years and ages to become more assertive, to demand our rather than to please or to ask. We demand actually. So that assertiveness comes from the word queer. So given into the given into the term called queer, definitely will bring that assertiveness, but also each single individual should be identity should be become more vocal and more assertive. I mean, transgender people, gay people, bisexual, lesbian, every in LGBT spectrum also need to be more assertive to get like things happen actually to get our identity, to claim our identity and spaces also within every spectrum. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. And the next question is, how can we promote gender inclusivity through the process of formal education?
Just including a third gender column will not provide a gender inclusivity. That's what not technically I feel gender inclusivity. Uh, Inclusivity is creating a space. For example, reservation is a single example in education institutions and employment, everything, because we have various structures to be navigated through. We ourselves have created these hierarchies, and that reservation will tend to make more inclusive of trans or LGBT people into the educational institution but itself. After they get education, they need to be promoted in employment also. That's how inclusivity needs a lot of resources, lot of strengths to be reconsidered actually, to consider the spaces also, to reconsider the spaces also.
Okay, ma'am, this is the last question. We do have a number of films and literary works on people with diverse gender identities. And do you think these films or literary works have been able to ensure greater gender inclusivity?
I don't think that we need more much writings. I think which should be uh, we should be come to the working class actually. I feel what I mean to say is that if we have books uh, and we more writings about LGBTQI inclusive, that itself won't work out. I feel like they should be translated into actions, or they should be some translated into few media tools, which even it goes to the illiterate in the sense of who are not educated. The audience should be the target audience should be must be, because larger portion of our country are not much educated, and many of us are dependent on media tools, for example. So what I mean to say is that to bring this inclusivity, or within this writings, or within this whatever media you said, more more visual, audio visual things are have much impact on the larger audience who are into the working class and who are not much educated. What I feel is more important.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you for being part of this webinar. And also, thank you for patiently answering all the questions. And I also thank our dear participants for their active involvement in this discussion. Thank you. Over to you, Fastana.
Yes, it is now time for us to part ways for the notes. I may call upon the youthful and spirited presence of our department, Miss Annie Matthew, to propose the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. So it's my pleasure to extend vote of thanks in this occasion. So it is also my pleasure to acknowledge the gratitude of Department of English, Government College Kottayam, to all the dignitaries and participants of today's function. And today's lecture was one of a kind, and Ms. Rachana Mudraboyina gave insights and gave us awareness on the trans perspective of the inclusivity of gender diversity in language. And she also explained how the term gender is a continuum or a spectrum, and it is not binary of feminine and masculine genders, and it is up to the person to decide his or her gender. And ma'am, of course, this was an enriching session for us. So on behalf of the Department of English, Government College Kottayam, I extend my sincere gratitude
Thank you.
to Ms. Rachana Mudraboyina, who spent some time from her busy schedule to grace the occasion. And I wish you all success in your future endeavors. Thank you, ma'am. And I thank our principal, Dr. R. Prakash, who is always constant support for us. Thank you, sir. Now, our HOD Somarajan, sir. He is always a source of inspiration and support to all of us in the department. And thank you, sir, for being with us and for encouraging all of us. And now I would like to thank Ms. Lekshmi P.S, who is the coordinator of this program, and Ms. Biya George, who chaired this session, for their dedication, hard work, and enthusiasm. And I thank all my colleagues, and special thanks to Sijosa from Botany Department, who made this live streaming process a success. And I also like to appreciate the effort of our students. Special thanks to Fasana, Akash, Ajit, Lakshmi, then Albin, Asha Jasmine, Anaka, Asif, Anju, and Abanna. Then I thank all the faculty members from different colleges and universities in and outside Kerala, and all other participants who have attended this seminar. So once again, thank you all. Have a nice day.